Now, therefore, I, John J. Tecklenburg, Mayor of the City of Charleston, on behalf of our City Council and our citizens, do hereby rededicate Waterfront Park as the Joe Riley Waterfront Park. Congratulations, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor Tecklenburg. Thank you very much, the wonderful Charleston Symphony Orchestra. What a treasure for our community. Let's give another round of applause for them. There. I want to thank all of you for being here. I thank all of you for being here. And I want to thank everyone who had a role in this rededication and in the design and construction of the park. And it is impossible for me to thank everyone, and at the risk of leaving people out, and please excuse me, I would like to just mention a few people. Those who spearheaded this rededication element, how it should be done, and to have it done. My dear friends, David Rawl, Capers Barr, Hy Lassane, our park's lead designer of many years ago, Stu Dawson, council members Moody and Waring, a part of that early team, Jacob Lindsay, Jason Kronsberg, the city, Steve Livingston, Alan Dawson, who contributed to this plan, the Crosby family and Wildwood contractors who've done so many wonderful monumental landscaping work in our city, creative work for this work, Sheila Wertimer, Edmund Most, Nate Yokoyama, who is the overall capital projects manager for these improvements, Clark DeCiantis, Amy Wharton, the city's chief financial officer, Austin Nelson, Jake Schoenberg, again, Harry Lassane and the Charleston Parks Conservancy, the Lowe family and Lowe Enterprises. And again, my apologies for those that I left out. Just accept the frailties of my mind in advancing age. That is my best excuse. And the creation of this park, with Steve Livingston and others that I will mention, was a most collaborative venture, as are most important collaborative ventures in our experiences. I also want to thank Helen Hill and the Charleston Convention and Visitors Bureau as well. I've always especially admired people in positions of power, the head of a company or a division or a unit in the armed forces, or a master, the boss. I've always especially admired when those people of power were especially kind to their workforce, especially those who could be considered servants. Special acts of humble kindness to those people always warmed my heart. So today, that's how I feel, because I was but your public servant. And among my duties and responsibilities to you, the citizens of Charleston, as your mayor and as your servant, was to never relent in enhancing the public realm. Reminded of the Athenian oath that citizens took, we pledged to pass this city on not as, but more beautiful than we found it. I understood as your servant, that was my responsibility to never relent in the process of doing that. So here in this park, I was simply doing my job and serving you. And you have been especially gracious to me, for which my family and I will always be grateful. And as the mayor said, in chief within the public realm are the opportunity to add to and enhance the city's systems of parks. For parks are different in this way. Every citizen owns them equally, and they share them and use them together. I must confess that among my greatest joys of being your mayor and being your servant was participating in the conception, the planning, and design of our parks. I forget the number, I think it was over 50 or so new parks that we created, tiny ones, big ones, urban, rural, wonderful parks on James Island, Johns Island, West Ashley, Daniel Island, and others. For me to work with gifted designers to conceptualize what the given park could be or in its park's restoration, the broad brushes, and then sitting again to develop the details, what it would be, how it would look. That in the design process of a park, it's different in that you put people in there as you plan it. You see the child romping for the first time near the parents' outstretched arms, or the kick of a soccer ball, or the running of the bases. Young lovers holding hands, and great-grandparents doing the same. Sitting in the warming sun and the breeze of the cooling shade. So for me, on a day that I got to work on planning of the parks, at the end of the day and after being home with Charlotte and the boys and getting ready for bed, I want you to know that, that my last thoughts were the joyful thoughts of my work that day in planning and designing parks for the use of our citizens. Every park is important. Each one, even the tiniest one, was special. And when we could put a park on the water, and we did in all sections of our city, that was even more special, because water, as Jim Rouse, a great urban visionary years ago, said, water is magic. And as John recounted my words, you put it on the water, and then the magic of all that happens, depending on where it was. But this park, this place was special because it wasn't just that it was on the magic of water, it was on this majestic harbor. So for every visitor here, you gave them that. It belonged to them. When I was in Boy Scout camp a long time ago, I think it was 55, Camp Ananwa, as a crow flies, about 18 miles from here. It said there was a big fire in Charleston. The Clyde Line terminals burned down. And on Wadmalaw Island, you could see the smoke. It was said that the fire was so hot, all wood, all along here, the piers and the terminals gone, and the fire was so hot that in the People's Building, which you can't see but 2.5 blocks from here, a mid-rise building, it was said that the workers, if they touched the window panes, burned their hands. So when that fire was gone, the terminals were gone and charred pilings remained. And for about a half of a century, that was it. Brickbats, debris put in it. You could do that back then. Some scruffy surface parking made. You often, if you were down there in the morning, could see empty wine bottles and liquor bottles. It was a very ugly space, and the city's axis back then ran north-south anyway. There was no eastward pull unless you got down to High Battery. So that's what existed when I had the honor of being elected mayor. Peter and Patty McGee, I don't know if the McGees were able to come today, wonderful citizens in our community, but they invited Charlotte and me short after I was elected to meet with Charles and Betty Woodward. It was about 42 years ago. I remember that evening crisply. It was the McGee's home, beautiful brick home adjacent to the Dock Street Theater. We had dinner in the upstairs dining room because Charles and Betty were willing to give money if the city would acquire this desolate space and create a park. The minor problem was that the landowner didn't have it for sale. And, so the question the Woodwards had, would I be willing to, for the citizens, proceed to acquire it by eminent domain to create a public place along the water's edge? Well, the Woodwards were an adorable couple. They've long since passed away, but they were so precious. And Charlotte and I loved them and loved being with them and their energy and the love. And they said, would you be willing to acquire the land? And I said, absolutely, you got a deal. And they said they'll put in half the money. It was praised for $1 million to put $600,000. We went and got a federal grant quickly through a state program that no longer exists, so it had the money to buy it. But the landowner, though, didn't have it for sale. And in the process, he had envisioned the Venice of the Southeast. Along here, high-rise buildings, gated, privatized. So anyway, I was determined to acquire it. And I told him that we were going to use eminent domain, which he didn't like a lot, and accused me of being a Hitler-like dictator. He then got a Iranian businessman. That was before the fall of Shah. Hot thing was Iran. They had a lot of money. An Iranian businessman coming here was going to rent the space for $1 million a year, but that made the price, the value of land, way over $1 million too. And but we persevered and worked out a complicated land swap. Didn't pay any more than the $1.2 million, not a penny more than the appraised value. And later, the owner of the land and I became very good friends, and we acquired the property. And then we began with the design. And I had the great fortune of us being able to assemble the world-class team of Stu Dawson and Asaki Associates, Ed Pinckney, who's here, and I might ask you all to stand and just stay standing just a minute. Stu Dawson is right here, Ed Pinckney. Jack Robertson is not here. Where's Ed? Right there. Jack Robertson, my city landscape architect and great landscape architect, Steve Livingston. Bill Wallace was a city planner. Sheila Wertimer, a city landscape architect. And there were others, so excuse me, but we got together. They were selected, and we got together, and we met, and I said, now before you pull out your pencil and bring out your drawing paper, I want us to walk through the city. Because what they knew, we all need to be reinforced, is you don't plop something down on the edge of a historic place. It's got to feel integral, and it's got to respect. So we started, Stu calls it a forced march, but we started on Queen Street, went through the counting house, that the wonderful building the CNS Bank had then, to Chalmers, through Washington Park, through the Confederate home, across Broad Street, Robert Harling's building, little alley, to St. Michael's Alley, then winding through Beaton's Alley and Longitude Lane and Stowe's Alley and Church Street and all the downtown street, peeking in gardens, looking at details, absorbing the scale of Charleston, the delicate scale, strong in some ways, but the delicate scale and the fabric of this city, so they all would have that ingested as we began to plan this park. First goal was, of course, to understand the park's purpose. And that's the first thing you do in designing a park. It's hard work. What is this park at this place in this city or town? What is its purpose? What should it do? And we decided that the purpose of this park should be that a thing of beauty is a joy forever, and in a bustling city, people need inspiring places of peace and repose. No retail. Parks around America right there, no, you gotta have retail. No retail. No retail. No event space. No events. Biggest event you have in this park is a wedding up to 25 people at the Pineapple Fountain. That's it. Because it's everybody all the time. Maximum access to the water's edge. Design it so you could see it and feel it and touch it, and I'll get to details in a minute. I hate to tell you, but even the pier down there is slightly lower than the wharf, just to bring you ever closer, and then the wonderful views. That it should be a simple, not gussied up, classic design and the highest quality. When we got the bids for the park, and I'll get that later, when we got the bids for the park, it was more of course, than we expected. And the contractor said, Joe, don't worry, we will take the gold plate out. And I said, with due respect, I said, we're not taking any gold plate out. Not that it was gold plate, but we're not taking the granite out, the other stone, the precast, the wrought iron, the fountains, the mature trees, because what you do with public parks is this. They belong to everyone. If you have a lawn or garden, you have some elements in it. You might not have either. Or if you have a lawn or garden, you might have some furniture in there. But to the parks that you own, that's where what civilizations have always understood. Stone, granite, beautiful art, highest quality, because that then belongs to everyone. And a city is stronger, a society is stronger when those things that we love the most, those possessions, if you will, we own together and share together. So there would be no cutting back on the quality of the park. And then we worked hard on the details, because details, you know, a great work of art, we see it from a distance, but they could be 1,000 strokes in there. And the artist was attentive to every stroke and every color and every shape. So I'll give you a few quick examples. The seating wall, people sitting over there. We wanted a great lawn, but if you have a great lawn at grade, then paths get worn. The shortest distance 2 lines, and then it just starts looking like it's not kept up very well. It's kind of run out. So we had to have the lawn raised so that they wouldn't be the common point of entry. You'd get out on it, and but then it should be raised enough so that you could comfortably sit on it. So not so low, that's not good. But then you don't want it so high that a child would be fearful of jumping off. So we measured and measured, came up with 14 inches for the seating wall. The benches, we had the battery benches that were nice. Ed and Stu said, let's take that, but let's increase every element by 25%, and then slightly redesign it. And then we had mock-ups with styrofoam to get the right feel. So the bench was designed to be comfortable. I've been in benches in every park that I've been to in every city in this country, and I've never found a more comfortable bench than the Waterfront Park bench. Then it was Stu's idea for the swings on the wharf. And so then we had to get that the exact right height. So we had mock-ups and hang a swing, and because what we wanted was that your toes could touch to kind of push off, but your feet wouldn't drag, and you had enough room to pump like you learned as a child on a swing. The swing had to be perfect. Everything had to be perfect. And then the path material. I felt it should be gravel because it makes a sound. It's a nice crunch. You know, it's kind of soft, and so we needed gravel, and that's easier said than done. So we got the gravel sample and just brushed up granite, and that was, you know, Charleston has a wonderful pastel palette, so we can't have just that. And then, so I started a 2-year quest for gravel. Every place I went, I was looking on the ground. People say, what is that man doing? He's just stuck in the ground. But every place I went, I looked at gravels, and Stu got 8 samples, and we got those, and then Steve Livingston, we got some more. And then we wanted the gravel to be strong enough so that a baby carriage would work on it. It wouldn't be so weak that you'd kind of, you know, be tired walking through. High heels would work on it, and bikes and all like that. And that's very complicated, and I can tell you all about the very kind of stones you got to have. But then we needed the color. So I was looking for the right color. Every place I went, I thought I had it. At the Smithsonian, at the castle, they'd done the grounds around there, and I think Sasaki had worked on that. And so I was excited. I saw it, and I went there one day. I was at a meeting, and I wanted to get a sample. You know, how do you get a sample? And so I realized I had an envelope with me that had my airline ticket, so I took the the airline ticket out, and I squatted down and scooped a little gravel into my envelope. About then, a armed security guy started heading in my direction. And I decided I either could wait and explain to him he was overweight, and so I decided to run for it. So I ran out and I brought that material home, and but it wasn't quite right either. And then Stu, we kept working, so we got some granite from North Carolina, granite from South Carolina, and granite from Texas, Baldwin red, and put all that together, and we got the best path material in the world. And so anyway, and I could keep you all day on the details, and I'm going to feel bad tonight when I get home and say, why didn't I tell them about that? And we got the rooms. The rooms are wonderful. Those are special. Well, I'll tell you about the rooms very quickly, but see, we got along there, we wanted the scale low, you could sit, but it would be different places. So everyone, you walk along the brick path, and you walk into the little room. The benches are a little different. The materials are organized a little different. So that's the one I like. So you see in the summertime when it's hot, somebody with a laptop or reading a book or getting a snooze or having a sandwich. Anyway, so we got the design, we needed the money. And Charleston back then, the city, when I was elected, fellows, the city operating budget was $11 million, the whole thing. And so, I had to be nervous if the citizens thought I was wacky with high-priced things. So we had to start raising private money, and my dear friend Capers Bob was the fundraising chair. So we started raising private money first, and we got that going. And then we needed to get a new program that hadn't been used in South Carolina. Tax increment finance had to go to the Supreme Court for that. And then we needed a big federal grant. And Reagan was in office then, so I needed Republican help. I went to see Senator Thurman. Senator Hollings helped too. And Senator Thurman, he gave me a desk in his office. I was there every week, working on it. He gave me the nicest compliment. He said, Joe, I've never seen anybody work as hard in my life as you, but I knew that for you as your servant, I had to get the money. We had to build the park. So we got the federal money. We got the tax increment financing, and then we had the groundbreaking. And it was right here, and what we did was the team said you should do pile driving kind of thing, not with the big equipment. So just logs, you hammer down. And so Senator Hollings, Senator Thurman, and I each had a pile to drive with a sledgehammer. But my team, they'd rigged them so that when Hollings and Thurman hit theirs, it went down a little bit. And then mine, they did something special. And so Hollings was a strong guy. His went down a little bit. Thurman worked out. He was known for his, strength. His went down a little bit. And then I hit mine with all the energy I had, and it disappeared. And Strom looked at me, he felt my muscles and all like that. Anyway, so we had the groundbreaking, but the groundbreaking required the pile driving, and we had two kinds of pile driving. We had the pile driving for all the weight-bearing surfaces, like where you seated, the seating wall, the fountains, and all of that, and the pier. But then the grassy areas, you didn't want to pile that. You couldn't do it for a lot of reasons. So we had to get the soil compacted. So the way you did that was using something like a fire hose. Whoops! Somebody get that. Thank you, Bill. It was always helping me out. Thank you. If you had not done that, the speech would be shorter. So you might anyway. So anyway, you like a fire hose. You would drive that down about 60 feet, about 12,000 of them. They were wick drains. And then you had to bring a lot of soil, tons and tons of soil on top of the wick drain, and then that weight over a period of, I guess, a year and a half would compress the soil, the water would come out, and the land would be stabilized. So after all the talk about the park and everything, I did the power driving, and basically what citizens could see was a huge 10-foot mound of dirt, you know. So I had a lot of detractors, and they said, oh, well, that's really nice, all this money, we got Mount Riley, that's what it's called. So anyway, while that was being compacted, we were able to construct the South Adges Wharf Park. It did need to be compacted. We did the beautiful pier, the pollarded plane trees, Ed's idea and Stu's idea, and I thought they needed a railing around the little wharf. People would fall in. And Stu said, no, they're not going to do that. They'll sit on the wooden bollards of the logs, and then, or they might sit on the granite and drape their legs over. I said, all right, I'm nervous about that. So with the Mount Riley here, we finally had a piece of the park done. And I was really nervous, honestly, whether anyone would come to this park. Would it be a boondoggle? Spend all this money because people didn't come here. So I was jogging one morning just as we finished the lower part of the park, and at sunrise, and there was a guy sitting just like Stu said someone would sit. And I was overjoyed. Someone likes the park. You know, I'm not a failure. And so I knew him. I didn't disturb him. He had a shoe shine stand at a barber shop at 15 Broad Street a few hours a day. Then he swept up in front of a gas station around the corner. He suffered from epilepsy. He frequently had seizures. People knew how to help him. His name was Clarence Hopkins. I saw him a couple of weeks later, and I said, Clarence, I saw you at the park. And he said, yeah, Joe. And I said, you go often? He said, I go every morning. I said, why is that? This is a poor man. He rode a bicycle, lived with his mother, had this illness. And he said, Joe, I like to come down there because I love it when the sun's coming up and the big ships are coming in, you know. So we opened the waterfront park about 2 years later, and I'd been looking for Clarence. He was the affirmation of why we worked for this, to me. And I found out he had had a stroke from which he never recovered. But he was in rehab, and we could get him to the opening of the park. I wanted him there. And so sure enough, we had the opening right here, symphony playing, prettiest sunset, middle of May, beautiful night. And Clarence was in a wheelchair, and I had him on the front row. He had a baseball cap on that, because his arms he lost, it was a bad stroke. But someone had put the cap on him, it was a little, you know, a little askew, like if you put your own cap on, you get it just right. And he smiled, he couldn't talk anymore, and but I had him right there because I knew he would enjoy it. I didn't introduce him. Nobody really knew who it was except my team that had worked so hard on it. But I wanted him there to remind me and all who worked on the park why we did it and why we do it and why these are so important. Because that citizen of Charleston who had never seen the rocky coast of Maine or the sunset in the Pacific or the purple mountain majesties or amber waves of grain, all he knew was his city. But in his city, coming on a bicycle, he could go down to a park that he owned equally with everyone else and shared with everyone else, and clothe himself with peace and beauty every day. That's why we built this park. And that's why we built this park. That's why we build our public parks. And And that's why this park is so special to me. Thank you very much.